Hello and welcome to the Jim Ruff Show. Today my guest and special privilege is to have Ruth Gordon with us, and she's the Jefferson County Clerk.
That's true.
And Ruth is also a democracy activist and now finds herself in a public elected position.
That is true too.
And so welcome, Ruth.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So today, I'm hoping one of the things I'd really like to do is have you talk a little bit about your experience in the transition, and also to kind of get to this idea of how do we get the government. I mean, I've got some new tools and some new ideas about how government might include the citizens, and so maybe hear a little bit about the struggles of government, and then maybe talk a little bit about how that might be fixed.
Well, okay. Well, I hope you've got some good ideas, because Lord knows we need some good ideas. My interest in good government goes back to before I was in elected office. I was one of the charter members of the local League of Women Voters, and I was active in other organizations as well, and kind of came into my current position suddenly. And it's been really interesting to me to see how a lot of the really great ideas that really made sense when you put them in a context of a machine that's already churning and that is governed by so many laws and the administrative code, the revised code of Washington, the ordinances, and then just the practice that's built up in a government body in order to make things go from day to day. There seemed, when I first got there seemed to always be a really binding reason why I couldn't do this thing that made perfect sense to me. And
So you had this idea, it was all clear what ought to happen.
well, some things were clear.
And then as soon as you get into government, it's like...
It's kind of like that dream where you're running, but you can't get
Yeah,
anywhere, you're running
yeah.
through molasses. It's kind of like that. And a lot of the things that I could do as a self-employed person, I was a sole proprietor. Well, you know, that's the opposite of being in government. Anything you want to do that you can afford to do that's legal, you can do it, and you don't have to even talk to a committee.
Yeah.
So that's the context I was coming from. So I've never worked in a bureaucracy. So for me, it was kind of being thrown into the cold water. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
So that's one of the problems, is the government gets stymied because there's good ideas, and yet they are struggling to implement or act commonsensical stuff.
Well, that's true, but you know, oftentimes when somebody says, "Oh, you can't really do that," and I would say, "Well, why can't I do it?" And you chase it down to the laws and the rules, and you realize that they are there for a reason. I don't think you want people in government who are having new ideas all the time,
Yes.
because you want a robust, stable system that will provide the services that government's supposed to provide.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing
Yeah.
that it's
not a bad
constrained.
thing. So you get into government, and all of a sudden you realize you can't just act,
That's true.
and yet it's not a bad thing.
Not necessarily.
It's a good thing. It's probably
It
a
can
good
be.
thing.
You want some structure.
You want some structure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one issue, is how do we as a people, how do we make commonsensical stuff that is consultative, like
That's
you
a
say,
new word
check
for me.
check with the committee you mentioned, and how do we make those commonsensical decisions that really work in a quick and commonsensical way, I guess is what we're saying.
Well, I don't think you don't get to do that very often. in
Don't get to
government.
do that. Okay. So
Sometimes.
that's one issue. Another issue I wanted to raise, which is the issue of special interests. If you want to take action, and the one that comes to my mind is recently they had the shoreline. They were going to try and make something environmentally sound.
Yeah.
And the shoreline issue comes up. They want to. I think they wanted to extend the buffer zone where you can build to. They wanted to extend it, and lo and behold, now, lots of people show up, angry property owners. They're upset, and they
don't want
are
to lose
saying
the right
no.
to develop their property as they thought they were going to be able to.
Right. They don't want to lose their right, and yet some scientist is saying, gee, the best interest is on the lake or the sound is to make sure we have a buffer zone. So how do we, and of course the common mainstream citizen isn't involved.
Right.
So you just have this room full of angry people saying, no, we want, we're unanimous. How come you're making this change?
That's such a good point.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that the ordinary citizens, the everyday citizen, is busy with doing their stuff,
they're doing
going
their
to
thing.
soccer games, that
That's
sort of
right.
thing. They don't
Paying the
have any
bills.
incentive. I mean, they don't have enough
Well,
incentive.
and also they don't really know, well, is it something that a scientist said, or is it really true?
Right.
We're not experts in all of, the realities, not to mention the case law, or the statute, or the federal laws that might pertain in some way. I mean, we're not experts, any of us, and that is really the challenge, because the issues that government deals with are so complex, and you really do need to understand them to make a good decision.
So that's the key. That's really the key. We were talking about the fact that how hard it is to make common sense decisions,
It
and
is.
how difficult it is when the special interest setting, and now you're talking about the complexity of these issues that require experts, that require the difficult weighing of the options. So those are three difficulties, and what I want to make the case is that, okay, the cure for those, and whatever else we come up with, is a new way to involve citizens.
Well, what is that new way?
Okay, so the old way, I'll start with that first, just so people get grounded in it. The old way is to have a hearing, or where
A public comment
a
period.
public comment period or something, and then again, you still have that special interest orientation, or the people that are directly affected oriented. So it's self-selected, and that misses the boat. You can have a town meeting, again, a lot of times
People will self-select.
You self-select, and a lot of times they're self-selecting because they want to meet the neighbors or meet the politicians. But,
Maybe.
Yeah, but a lot of the old timers say, "Oh, the heck with it! I've been to 10 of those."
Oh,
and
yeah,
so I'm
once
not
you've
coming."
gone to a few town meetings, you've kind of seen it, and if it's not your thing, you're not going to
It's not your thing. So, and then there's special things like citizen juries, which are really oriented toward deliberative thinking, like weighing the different options. So somebody gives you options and you weigh the options. What's new, and what would be best, I think, is a way somehow that all the citizens could be involved. We could involve everybody. Some way that the quality of conversation wouldn't be weighing the different options, because then you end up in a vote situation.
Right.
But it would be really a creative, collaborative conversation where we're trying to find out what works for everybody.
Okay.
Now, we don't think of that as happening in a big group. We think of that as happening in a small group. But that's the kind of conversation that's desirable, is that all of us are no longer stakeholders. We put aside our stakeholders side and we look into this problem as citizens, and we seek to listen to what everybody's saying, and we try and get creative about what's best for everybody. And we even put aside the current structure of the systems, because there's really no higher authority than we the people. So if all of us could somehow come up with unanimous or near unanimous perspectives, we're not really bound anymore by the laws or constitution or anything.
I think that would be a tough sell in the courts, but let's say that you could have everybody involved, and this is not just everybody who doesn't know anything. I mean, one of my great anxieties is that, for instance, with Initiative 1033, people are going to be voting on this who have no real understanding of what its impact will be, and it'll be an impact that will be harmful to we the people and to individuals for the short-term promise of a reduction in property taxes.
I see.
But it
really messes things up.
Yeah, and there has been no conversation.
Yes.
I wish there had been a conversation.
Okay, so this is how, what we're talking about is how to have that conversation, how to have it involve, maybe not everybody, but almost, we try to get everybody.
Yeah.
How to have
would you
it
do that?
be at that high quality level.
That'd be great, but how are those people all going to know what they need to know to have a high quality
And that's the
conversation?
key too. How do we have the expert information and the information so that it's all part of the mix?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So that I think is possible. The problem is the strategy for doing it is new.
What is your strategy for doing
Okay.
it? Because I'm
that's
for
okay.
if we can do direct democracy, that's great.
Okay, this is not direct democracy
But what's
either.
the difference?
Okay, direct democracy is where you put out an issue and everybody votes.
That's like an initiative process.
That's initiative process. So I call it wise democracy.
All right.
Because it's really a difference in the caliber of the way we're talking and the way we're thinking together rather than who does what when.
So how do you raise the caliber? Because right now we don't really have a culture of collaborative conversation in the United States.
Yes.
We've got these pot shots.
Exactly. And in
It's
my
not helpful.
judgment, we have to have this conversation rise. And what one way to get it to rise is to wait till the crisis happens, and once everything falls completely apart, everybody kind of realizes, hey, none of the structures work anymore, and then we have to do something different, and we start talking at that high level. So I call that high level of
But
thinking,
there's a lot of casualties.
and that's a horrible way to do it.
Okay.
So, but I call the quality of thinking choice creating. And it's not, see now, the founders sought rational debate. That was their highest, that was what they thought was great. So, and that's not good enough. And deliberation, that's what
I'd settle for that, though.
Let's settle for it, yeah.
I'd like to see it.
So, okay, so the essence of this proposal that I'm making is the quality of conversation, assuring that, or stimulating, facilitating that quality of conversation.
Right.
And the way that happens is that, let's say with this 1033, or with the budget, but the 1033, your issue.
Well,
So what we would do is we'd have a random selection of, say, 12 citizens,
right, like I would call a jury for the courts.
like you would call a jury
We
for
could
the
call a jury of citizens.
You could. And it's a little bit different because we don't have the lawyers sit there and say, well, we're going to remove this person and remove that person. And
Yeah, there's no fraud
we just
here.
randomly select people and that's who we got. And the quality of thinking is assured by the facilitator. We have a special kind of facilitation that we call dynamic facilitation. And what that person does is they set up the room. Nobody has to know any information. They don't have to be trained. They just talk, but the facilitator makes sure that everything that a person says becomes an asset to the group. And they use 4 charts to do it. They have a chart of problem statements, of data, of concerns, and of solutions. And so what happens is the group, in a period of 2 days, this randomly selected group, looks at the issue, and they don't necessarily come on, yes, we need this, or no, we don't need this. They come up with, this isn't the real problem, or they could come up with, yes, this is what we ought to do for now, but they'll probably come up with, this is what we ought to do for now, and this is the real problem, and this is what really ought to happen. That's probably what they'll come up with.
So they would come up with a short-term and a
They
long-term
probably
response
would.
to the problem.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. When you have a creative conversation like that, and the group reaches unanimity, which is what they will do, they'll probably come up with something like that. And then they speak to, we convene a meeting of everybody and maybe have local access television. And they speak to the group. Now, we've done this a number of times. And what happens, and whoever shows up, is people listen to the story of how the group reached this conclusion.
Right.
And it's a group conclusion. Everybody in the room,
They all own it.
they all own it. And they're saying, well, we started out confused, or we were divided, or we whatever, and we had some breakthroughs along the way. And we ended up with, my gosh, this is the real problem, and my gosh, this is what really needs to happen. Now, how do we fit this 1033 or whatever into that?
Or the Shoreline Master Plan.
Or the Shoreline Master Plan, or the budget. How do we fit that into that? And so they have a wise, thoughtful comment to make. And what happens is when you bring the general population in, and they hear this story, they go, oh yeah, this isn't the normal political conversation. I know this conversation. This is where we're trying to figure out what's best. And the reason why we don't normally do that is our usual system enforces debate, the discussion, the argument. So now all of a sudden we've seeded into the normal situation, because this group just disbands. Now we have a clear voice of what the people really want. And in the audience, 90+% of the people are saying, yeah, I think so too. So if you can bring lots of people into the audience, and if you can do it maybe one more time, now you get the experts into the picture. Because this group, maybe if you're doing 1033, okay, maybe you do it once and you have the experts talk to them and they understand the situation and then they meet privately. If it's the shoreline plan, you might do that, but then you might do it again with a different random selected group. So what you really want to do is stimulate an all-county conversation about what we really ought to be doing.
Or an all-state conversation.
Or an all-state conversation, or an all-nation conversation. I mean, it really is
Healthcare,
entirely about healthcare, exactly.
I'd love to see a conversation about healthcare nationwide, because it is a problem that affects so many people on so many levels, and it's unconscionable.
It's unconscionable.
Some
but
of
they
the
can't
things
think
that are
of
status
it.
quo.
The special, I don't know, one of the things I notice is that, we've changed topics, but one of the things I've noticed is that if I watch the evening news, 90% of the commercials are healthcare companies. So it's really hard for me to believe what's coming across that screen. But so anyway, here's a way. I think if I was an elected official or an administrator of the county or whatever, here's a way to make my life a whole lot easier. Here's a way to...
Well, you would understand what the values of your constituency are. And that would be really helpful. The thing about, say, doing the shoreline master plan that way, for instance, is that there are so many laws and there are so many invariables that are given. It's not, oh, what should we do about the shoreline? It's, okay, we've got to consider this and this and this and this, and then there's this and then there's this. And it's like a Rubik's Cube. You know, you get to, so I think what you're trying to do here is create a group of honest actors, people that have no vested interest, who are honestly giving it their best sincere shot for the good of the... But if you've got all these little things, then it's hard to balance that.
Well, the way we have two things. We call it the Wisdom Council is one, and the other one is the Creative Insight Council.
Okay.
The Wisdom Council chooses the topics, and it's ongoing. So every 4 months, a new randomly selected group is selected. They pick the issues, and they begin to evolve a We the People conversation and a We the People. That's kind of down the road. The first thing is to just do what we talked about here, where we say, okay, we're going to deal with the master plan, and we're going to work on it. And the idea isn't to create these 12 people saying, here's what we're doing. But the idea is to use those 12 people to stimulate an all-county or an all, the whole system conversation, and to raise the level of that conversation so that we're not doing the usual bickering thing.
Well, I'm all for that. I'm really curious how you see the way to get all of the residents in the county actually interested in what those 12 people have decided.
Well, the best one way to do it is if we could charter it into place. In other words, if there could be a vote and say, hey, do you want to do this? And so then people would talk about it and say, oh, okay, this is a good thing to do. That's the stickler, is so far. I mean, one idea we have for the national case is to do a reality TV show, or some to slip it in, But if it was, and I wrote my book, Society's Breakthrough, about doing it as a constitutional amendment. If it was a constitutional amendment, then everybody would definitely pay it.
But let's say you've got a constitutional amendment that says we're going to do this, and everybody's going to come to the meeting where the 12 people say what they decided. Do you think that would happen?
Well, no, you wouldn't say that. You just say we're going to have this random selection, and this group, when they speak, is a voice of we the people. That's all. It's a symbolic voice of we the people. No binding. Now, what we pay attention to the election. In other words, there's an election between Barack Obama and I've forgotten already.
What's his name? John McCain?
We pay attention because we're involved.
Yeah.
And because it's constitutionally sanctioned. And it's how we do things. And when Barack Obama wins the Nobel Peace Prize, well, heck, he's a symbol of all of us. One person, symbol of all of us. Why? Constitutionally sanctioned. Same idea. We got a constitutionally sanctioned group of 12 people. We'd pay attention. It would be we'd be wondering what this symbolic voice of we the people said.
I hope you're right. I don't have that much faith in my fellow man right now. I think that the president has a mythology and a standing for 2 centuries in
Yes.
our culture. Everybody's got an idea what the president is. This is a new idea, and I think that these 12 people. I think your reality TV show is actually a really good way to do it. But it's people are going to make their own myth about that. They're going to apply. They're going to transfer meaning onto it. It doesn't come ready with its own meaning.
Well, if we have the advantage of a constitutional amendment, see, I wrote my book and assumed people would go, this is such a great idea, we should go implement this. Mm-hmm. And that obviously isn't going to happen. But the sanction now that we've realized over time is that usually when this group of 12 meets and presents, almost every time they say, hey, this is a great process. We got to do this.
No, I'm sure it is a very fulfilling process.
Well, I know, but what I'm saying is symbolically, what you have is you have a symbol of we the people, mm-hmm. just like the Constitution, saying this is what we need to do. And so it's a way to get that kind of symbolic charter. This voice, one of the things, Ruth, that I think is really key here, mm-hmm. is that there really hasn't been, that I'm aware of, in 220 years, a voice, a symbolic voice of we the people, in 220 years. It is possible to create this voice using this method, mm-hmm. a symbolic voice. Just you and me, with enough resources, could do it. In other words, randomly selecting citizens from the nation, 12, even 12, pulling them together, them choosing the issue, them reaching unanimity, and them being totally random, that, speaking with one voice, is a legitimate symbol of we the people of this country. I don't know of any other.
Well, all you need to do is pull pages out of the phone book to get a random sample from Jefferson County. I mean,
there's a lot of ways to get random samples.
There's lots of ways to get a random sample.
But the key is facilitating them to get one statement mm-hmm. on the issue of their choice. Mm-hmm. If you get that, because otherwise it's government saying, here's what you should talk about, or somebody saying, here's what you need to talk about.
Right.
So this is a symbol. This is almost what happened with the Constitutional Convention, you see, because what they did is they didn't do it random, but they took...
They had delegates.
They had the delegates, and they essentially tried to do the same thing. They met for 4 months almost, mm-hmm. but they said, heck with what we've been sent here to do. They chose the issue. And they tried like heck to reach a unanimous perspective. They weren't trying to pull one over. Mm-hmm. And they came up with a proposal, just like the Wisdom Council, mm-hmm. and they disbanded. Mm-hmm. And it was really the rest of the conversation, the continental conversation, that really was the way that got carried forward.
Right.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left, so maybe I'll tie it back to where we were.
Okay.
This is so far-ranging. It's fun. So do you see a problem with doing this in the county?
No, I think you've already done it in the...
We've done it without chartering from the elected officials.
What do you mean by charter?
Well, where you get a letter in the mail that when you were randomly selected, it doesn't say
Jim wants you to come.
Jim wants you to come to give up your weekend. It's where the county commissioners and the county administrator and the other people are saying, everybody's saying...
The powers that be say,
powers
we
that be
need you.
say, you've been randomly selected and we need you to symbolically represent this county in this conversation. And so now, rather than randomly selecting 100 people and getting 2 out of that 100 or something, now we can get the first, we can randomly select, actually we randomly selected more, but we get a higher percentage of people coming, and we get much more attention. Now the media is on board. The media didn't hardly cover what we did. And now the media's on board because now it's sanctioned. And so all of a sudden we've got this thing, we're paying attention, and the producers here at Port Townsend TV are saying, hey, maybe I could do a show on this and I could cover this. And so it's a way to generate this.
Well, you can ask them. You know, it's not my
your
call.
Thing. But no, I'm not. I'm just,
But,
you're an elected official, and I'm.
Well, I am, but I'm not in charge of sending out that letter.
Yes.
I don't know. You know, that goes back to my original comment. Sounds like a great idea. I get it intuitively.
Yeah.
But, you know, my first instinct is, well, I'll have to run it by the civil prosecutor and see if, you know, what the laws are regarding that. Honestly, because there is always a reason not to do this really cool thing. Trust me, and this would be no exception.
Okay.
But you know, if they wanted to do that, and there is not some constraint against them doing it, you know, they could. But if we were betting odds, I would bet there's a reason not to.
There's a reason.
Yeah, I would bet there is. I don't know what it is. But I think that your idea is a good idea, and even if you didn't have the mandate of the government, I don't know why you couldn't put a one ad in.
Well, we've done that.
And then pull from the people who were interested.
We had a high school class do it for the city of Port
Yeah, I
Townsend.
remember that.
So, and it worked gangbusters, but hardly anybody came to the meetings and stuff.
Well, maybe what you need is a better PR arrangement.
Yeah.
And, you know, I actually think people would be interested to hear what you had to say, because we have so many issues, and if 1033 passes, we'll have so many more.
Yeah.
And we really do need people to be involved in some way in saying, this is what kind of government I really need. This is what I want my government to do. We take so much of it for granted because it has worked okay.
Yes.
It's going to stop working okay.
That's a great ending.
Okay.
Because it's going to stop working okay, and we've got to have some way to have the citizens say, here's what we want from our government.
We're going to break this system, and your crisis is coming.
Yes.
So, you know, don't vote for 1033. But even if you do, it's still going to come, because it's a structural problem.
It's a structural problem. And this, by the way, I think is a structural solution.
I think it's a really nice way to interject some clear, a clear signal beam to the people that have to make these decisions, so they have something more to go on than the people that happen to catch them in the grocery store or who came to the Monday morning, you know, public meeting.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ideas out there that they never hear.
Okay. Ruth, thank you very much for coming. This was a
it's my pleasure.
really fun show.
Well, good.